Everyone thinks the hardest part of investing is finding the right stock. It isn't. The hardest part is clicking one button. The account had been opened for 23 days. The money was already sitting there. Every paycheck, you moved a little more cash into the brokerage account, telling yourself that this weekend would finally be the weekend. You had watched the videos, you understood index funds, you could explain compound interest to your friends. You even knew why trying to time the market usually failed. Yet every time your finger hovered over the buy button, something invisible pulled it away. Maybe the market looked too expensive. Maybe there was another scary headline predicting a crash. Maybe you should wait until next month. Each excuse sounded logical. Together, they became paralysis. What nobody tells new investors is that knowledge doesn't remove fear. In fact, sometimes it makes fear worse. Because once you understand what investing really means, you also understand that every dollar you invest can lose value tomorrow morning. That's the moment investing stops being an interesting idea and starts feeling personal. Weeks pass like this for thousands of people every year, not because they don't know enough, because they believe confidence comes first. But confidence almost never comes before action. It comes after surviving your first uncertainty. And that is where almost every successful investor's story truly begins. Eventually, one ordinary Tuesday, you stop negotiating with yourself. You take a deep breath, you invest. Maybe it's $300, maybe it's $500. The number isn't important, the decision is. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then, the market opens the next morning. Your portfolio is already down, $23. Not thousands, just 23. Yet somehow it feels enormous. You refresh the app during breakfast, again before lunch, again in the parking lot, again before bed. You already know the number won't magically change because you checked it 12 more times. You check anyway. That's when you discover something every experienced investor already knows. The emotional weight of losing money is completely different from reading about losing money. Theory has no heartbeat. Real money does. That tiny loss teaches a lesson no book ever could. Markets move. Your emotions move faster. The real test isn't whether prices fall, it's whether your decisions fall apart with them. Because from this moment forward, you're no longer pretending to be an investor. You finally have skin in the game. Months become years. The portfolio slowly climbs toward $10,000. Not because you discovered the next superstar stock, not because you predicted the market. Because every month, regardless of headlines, another contribution quietly arrived. Eventually, investing stopped feeling like a decision. It became a routine. One automatic transfer, every paycheck, every month, whether markets were celebrating or panicking. That single habit changed everything. Here's the strange part. The portfolio still didn't feel life-changing. $10,000 wasn't enough to transform your future overnight. But something much more valuable had changed. You had transformed yourself. The person who once waited for the perfect moment now invested without asking permission from fear. That is why the first real rule of wealth isn't buy low. It isn't pick winners. It's much simpler. Automate what your emotions would otherwise interrupt. Because motivation disappears, habits don't. And fortunes are rarely built by occasional brilliance. They're built by ordinary actions repeated for extraordinary lengths of time. Then something unexpected happens. The portfolio crosses $50,000. For the first time, the account starts contributing alongside you. You open the yearly statement. Thousands of dollars appeared, without working extra hours, without asking for a raise, without selling anything. Your money had quietly earned money. It almost feels impossible, until the market falls.
A 1% drop used to be background noise. Now it's hundreds of dollars gone before lunch. Nothing changed mathematically, only psychologically. The percentages stayed identical, the dollar amounts became impossible to ignore. You suddenly understand why so many investors panic at exactly this stage. Growing wealth creates growing responsibility. Every larger balance magnifies every emotional reaction. The temptation appears. Maybe you should trade more. Maybe you should predict recessions. Maybe you should find something better. But history quietly whispers a different lesson. Complexity often feels smarter. Simplicity usually wins. Because while excitement chases quick profits, patience quietly compounds them. Then comes the statement you'll never forget. $100,000. You compare two numbers, how much you invested, how much the market earned. For the first time, the market did more work than you did. Read that again. Your portfolio generated more growth than your own contributions. Something fundamental has changed. The account no longer depends entirely on your effort. It has built its own engine. Every future gain now begins earning gains of its own. This is the moment compounding stops being an inspirational quote. It becomes something you can actually see. But with greater momentum comes greater temptation. A bad year can erase 5 figures on paper. The numbers become intimidating enough to make even experienced investors question themselves. And that's exactly why so many people abandon the strategy that created their success in the first place.
Then one brutal market correction arrives. Your portfolio drops by tens of thousands of dollars. Nothing about your investments has fundamentally changed, only the headlines have. Friends begin texting, experts flood social media with predictions, fear becomes louder than logic. This is where most investing stories split into two endings. Some people react, others prepare. Long before the crash ever happened, you wrote a simple investment plan. What you own, why you own it, when you'll rebalance, when you'll ignore the noise. So when panic arrives, you don't negotiate with fear. You follow the plan you created while calm. Because after years of investing, you discover the truth that almost nobody believes when they first begin. The greatest threat to your wealth was never inflation, never recessions, never stock market crashes. It was always the person staring back at you in the mirror. Markets recover. Emotions don't always recover as quickly. And the investors who eventually build extraordinary wealth aren't the ones who know the most. They're the ones who can trust a disciplined plan when every emotion tells them to abandon it. Then, one ordinary year, something happens that completely changes the way you think about money. You sit down to review your annual statement. You already know how much you contributed, $24,000, every automatic transfer, every paycheck, nothing unusual. Then your eyes move to the investment returns, $51,000. You read it twice. The market earned more than twice what your job added. For years, you believed your salary was carrying your future. Now, your portfolio had quietly become the hardest worker in your life. That's the tipping point almost nobody talks about. Not when you become rich, when your money begins producing more value than your labor. It's a strange feeling. You still wake up, still go to work, still answer emails, but somewhere in the background, another employee has started working full-time. Your capital. It never asks for weekends, it never sleeps. It simply keeps compounding while you're busy living your life. That's when another lesson reveals itself. The goal was never to replace work. The goal was to remove desperation from work. Because the moment money starts working beside you instead of depending entirely on you, every career decision becomes a little less frightening, and every financial decision becomes a little more patient. Then, one Tuesday morning, it happens. The account reads $1,003,842.
No confetti, no dramatic soundtrack, no phone call from the bank. You look at the screen for a few seconds, close the app, walk into the kitchen, make coffee. That's it. The moment you imagined for years lasts less than a minute, because reaching $1 million doesn't suddenly create a new person. It simply reveals the person you spent years becoming. Someone who kept investing when nobody noticed, someone who kept buying during crashes, someone who trusted a plan more than their emotions. The number feels surprisingly ordinary, but what it represents is extraordinary, not because of the commas, because of the choices that created them. Every ordinary decision quietly stacked on top of the last one, until one ordinary Tuesday became something you once believed was impossible. This is where most people imagine luxury begins: sports cars, beach houses, early retirement. But wealth teaches a completely different lesson. The greatest purchase isn't something you can park in your driveway. It's the ability to choose, to leave the job that slowly drained you, to refuse opportunities that paid well but cost your peace, to spend more evenings with your family without calculating the financial consequences, to work because you want to, not because missing one paycheck would change everything. Freedom doesn't always look expensive. Sometimes it looks like sleeping peacefully. Sometimes it looks like saying one simple word that used to terrify you: no. That single word becomes more valuable than almost anything money can buy. Because real wealth isn't measured by what you can purchase, it's measured by what you no longer have to tolerate. After 1 million, the question quietly changes. It isn't, how do I make more? It's, what is all this actually for? For years, every decision pointed towards growth: save more, invest more, wait longer. Now, growth is only one responsibility. Protection matters. Planning matters. Teaching your children matters.
Building something that lasts beyond your lifetime matters. The portfolio stops feeling like a scoreboard. It starts feeling like a responsibility. Money has finally stopped being the destination. It's become a tool, and tools are only valuable when you know what you're building. Looking back, something becomes almost impossible to ignore. There was never one magical investment, no secret stock, no perfect prediction, no once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The story wasn't built on extraordinary moments, it was built on ordinary ones. Investing after every paycheck, staying invested during every correction, ignoring every prediction that promised certainty, trusting time when emotions demanded action. The biggest victories were almost invisible while they were happening, because wealth wasn't created by dramatic decisions. It was created by refusing to interrupt a process that already worked. The market did its job. The real challenge was simply allowing it to. In the end, the story was never really about money. Money compounds automatically. People don't. Compound interest follows mathematical rules. Human beings follow emotional ones. Markets will always rise. Markets will always fall. That part was never under your control. What was under your control was becoming the kind of person who didn't panic every time the world did. The hardest part was never learning how compound interest worked. It was becoming patient enough, disciplined enough, and emotionally resilient enough to leave your investments alone long enough for compound interest to work on your behalf. Because in the beginning, you thought you were building a portfolio. You weren't. You were building an investor. And once that transformation happened, the portfolio simply followed.